If y'all only knew my level of hungover today, you'd be like, what in the hell is she doing? Truly, I'm wondering the same. Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Melina. This is another episode of Why Not. I have not done a Why Not episode in far too long, it feels like. But I wanted to do another one of these episodes because I have a lot of information to share, a lot of knowledge to drop, and I feel like why not crack open a bottle of wine and do what we drink? Here's the thing. I've actually been drinking the majority of the day already. I was at a puppy parade in downtown St. Louis, in Soulard. It's Mardi Gras season, people, and St. Louis really knows how to put on Mardi Gras, so that's where we were, and I was drinking rosé, so I figured let's keep it going, right? Which actually is pretty fitting for the video today, because today I'm telling you guys all about wine. We are getting into some basic facts, some wine 101, if you will, for all of you who want to dabble in wine but don't really know where to start, and I wanted to help you out with that. From a true wine addict, a true wine connoisseur, I am not a connoisseur, I don't even know why the fuck I just said that, a true wine-no, if you will, I felt like I needed to share my knowledge as well as some more knowledge that I found while surfing the internet and give you guys a little bit of background, because I feel like might as well know about what you're drinking, right? If we're gonna put this much work and work as in like we hate this or something, if we're gonna put this much like effort, we might as well know where it comes from, you know what I mean? So before we truly get started, I want to explain like the mess and like what's happening around me. We're moving. We literally just packed everything yesterday and we got to be out by Thursday, and there's just like boxes and just like shit everywhere, and so like my apologies. Okay, so before we really dive into wine, we might as well just talk about what I'm drinking here first. I'm drinking a rosé just because I feel like rosé is your hands down best day drinking wine. So I'm drinking this Vino rosé, and it's actually really freaking good. I would say this bottle's a little pricier than I would normally go for. This is like a $14, $15 bottle of wine. I was at the bougie grocery store, so I didn't have much to choose from. It's really good. I mean, it's worth $15, but I mean, you can find a cheaper one if you want one. Okay, now that we have kind of went over what kind of wine I'm drinking, let's just dive right in. Let's talk a little background here. So, what is wine? Okay, obviously, like we know what wine is. Wine is grapes. Like wine is fermented grapes. If you didn't know that, well, I'm sure as shit glad that you're here right now. The grapes are different than your regular like grocery store table grapes. They are definitely smaller, they're a lot sweeter, and they have more seeds. So that we kind of understand where our wine came from, let's talk actual wine itself. People talk about the body of the wine, they're really talking about the texture or like the heaviness of it. So I mean, is it like a light, like brisk wine, or is it more like heavy, I guess creamy, something that kind of like feels a little bit more like weighted on your tongue, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Okay, before we get into any specifics about wine, let's kind of talk about a pour of a wine. So this is something that I actually had to do research on before I even made this video, because like, I mean, I literally just fill my glasses up to the brim. Like it's just kind of, why not, you know, like I don't really have the time. But if we're talking like, if we're trying to be classy people here, and if we're trying to actually talk about like real wine connoisseurs and how they pour their wine, so basically a normal wine pour is supposed to be about 5 ounces. So the reason for that being is there's usually about 25 ounces in a wine bottle, so they say you should get about 5 servings from a normal wine bottle. And I'm like, what? Like who really truly has the time for that? I mean, maybe I'm just not of age to where I can really like appreciate like life and time to that extent, but like 5 glasses, my friend, like 2.5 tops. 5 servings? 5 servings? Like, honestly, if I came to your house and you served me a 5-ounce glass of wine, I'd be like, she must be a little tight on funds, because like, damn. She's like, I need at least this. At least this. So there are actually 9 different styles of wine when it comes to the body of the wine. We're gonna get into that in a couple minutes here, but let's just go over a few more things that kind of helps you break down like wine and its flavor. So the first thing being tannins. So you might have heard of tannins. So they're a natural polyphenol, I don't know the actual word, but it's basically a natural substance that is found in seeds, bark, leaves, fruit skin, that kind of thing. So tannins actually add a like bitterness or astringency. So it kind of gives you like the flavor, you know what I mean? When you take a sip of wine and it's got that really like, ooh, that's the tannins, you know? So tannins are actually most commonly found in red wines. They're usually not in white wines, but it adds more of a complexity to the wine. So for instance, if you want more of an example of what a tannin is, so when you taste like tea, like that bitterness of tea, that's tannins. Or like dark chocolate, the little bit of that would be tannins as well. That bitterish, astringent-y flavor, that's tannins. Okay, let's talk about the vintage of wines. So, vintage does not mean a wine is old. News to my ears. I thought vintage meant, oh shit, we're drinking vintage wine. Like, no bitch, no. Vintage means literally the year of wine. And the reason for that being is because wine grapes actually take a full year to ripen. Therefore, wine is only created once a year with that crop of grapes. And that's kind of where the term vintage comes from, because vint actually means winemaking and age implies the year it was made. So you put those together, vintage. So when you see a vintage year labeled on the wine, that is actually the year that the grapes were picked and made into wine. Okay, now that we have a little bit of background, let's just go right into the 9 styles of wine, and we're gonna talk about bodiness here so you guys understand like the texture and like what might appeal more to your taste buds. The first one, it starts with sparkling wine. So sparkling wine is obviously champagne. Your Cooks, your Moet, your Veuve, your all of the above, sparkling wine is champagne. When it comes to pairing foods, let's talk about what you want to pair with champagne. So the best foods to pair with champagne, that's gonna be like a brie cheese, something like creamy like that, a sweet bread, something to kind of bring out those flavors, shellfish, and then also I found this a little bit kind of amazing, buttered popcorn. It said buttered popcorn goes amazing with champagne, and that literally blew my mind because you're talking to 1, a champagne lover, 2, an extra fucking popcorn lover, and the fact that I have not put those two together fucks me up a tad, but we'll get there. Okay, and from your sparkling wines goes into your light-bodied white wine. So your light-bodied white wines, that's gonna be your Sauvignon Blanc and your Pinot Grigio. So these two, they're said to be like the best to pair with like any kind of food. So like if you are looking for a wine and you're just like, I don't know what to choose, but what is a wine that's a little bit more universal as to what you're eating, those two are said to pair with foods like better than a lot. But if you're looking for actual wines to go with Sauvignon Blanc, they say the best foods to go with Sauvignon Blanc would be goat cheese, green veggies, oysters, any kind of herbal sauce, just because I assume, because they're not super intense wines, so since they are a little bit more, I don't want to use the word bland because that's not the word, but they bring out the flavors in other foods. If you're looking for a good food to go with Pinot Grigio, creamy pasta is where it's at. Salmon, lemon, fish, garlic, anything really with a creamy cheese sauce, phenomenal. Okay, from your light-bodied wines, we're gonna move to your full-bodied white wine. So this would be your Chardonnay. So Chardonnay is actually perfect for red wine drinkers. If you're a red wine drinker and you're kind of looking to dabble into white wines, start with the Chardonnay. Chardonnay is perfect for red wine drinkers because of like the richness and almost creaminess of it. It's also a dry wine. So what makes Chardonnay making a little bit different is that it's usually aged in barrels. So not all of it is, but some Chardonnays are aged in barrels, which also appeals to whiskey drinkers usually because obviously whiskey is aged in barrels as well. Aging in the barrels actually makes the wine smoother and kind of gives it more of like that creaminess. So if you're drinking a Chardonnay that almost tastes buttery, kind of has a thickness, which is why it's the full-bodied wine, it's probably aged in an oak barrel. So since I am a red wine drinker, my favorite white wine is a Chardonnay. So I mean, you can get Chardonnays that are not aged in barrels, and those are a little bit more zesty, if you will. But I love a Chardonnay that's aged in an oak barrel, because it's a buttery Chardonnay. Oh my God, it really doesn't get any better than that to me. So the best foods to pair with Chardonnay. So pretty much all seafood goes well with Chardonnay, but if you're talking about your good meaty seafood, so like lobster, crab, scallops, that stuff pairs with Chardonnay, prime time. Also, if you want to do some simply seasoned like poultry or pork, that goes with it great as well. Here's the thing, Chardonnay has a great flavor. It's a little bit more intense than like a Pinot Grigio. So that's why you want to pair it with food that doesn't have as intense of a flavor. Okay, number 4 is the aromatic white wines. So this is your sweet wines. Okay, so this I have an issue with, okay? I mean, I don't have an issue with it, but like until actually doing my research, I literally looked at Moscato as like a non-wine. I was like, you're a disgrace, get out. But actually now reading more about it, and like Moscato is truly a real ass wine. Like it is one of the oldest wines. If you date back in history to when wine first started to be made, all of it was sweet. Cleopatra's favorite wine was a Moscato. So now I'm like, am I fucking up here or what? Yeah, my palate just doesn't do well with sweet wines, so it is what it is. So like I said, your aromatic wines are your sweet wines. So there's 2 different wines that fall under that. There's your Moscato, which is super sweet, and then there's your Riesling, which is sweet. So like Moscato is usually where people start when they're starting to drink wine. So if you've never had wine in your life and you're like, I want to dabble, usually that's where people start. I think it's disgusting. I've always thought it was disgusting, but it is what it is. Some people like it. Riesling is kind of a step up from Moscato. It's not as sweet. It's still pretty sweet, but you can find Rieslings that aren't like crazy sweet. So it's crazy to me to hear that Moscato paired well with foods, but it does. So this is me just being a hater. Listen, don't listen to me, because Moscato is truly a real wine, but whatever, it is what it is. So after doing my research, Moscato pairs well with spicy food. So that honestly makes a lot of sense to me, just because it is so sweet. It takes that spice and it dials it back a lot. So they say Moscato actually pairs really well with Asian food, Asian spicy food. Not only that, since Moscato is kind of considered like not a dessert wine, it's not technically a dessert wine, but it is sweet. So they kind of say pair it with like a dessert or cheeses, a charcuterie board, something along those lines. As for a Riesling, they say Riesling pairs well with, once again, Asian food, just because it does dial back all those flavors and that spiciness. And then also sushi. Okay, number 5 is rosé wine. So this is a bodiness of its own. So most people think that rosé wine is like red wine and white wine mixed, and that's actually not the case at all. It's actually made from the skins of red wine grapes. So rosé can actually be dry or sweet. I drink it dry. This is definitely dry. Read your labels, because it's hard to tell sometimes. It seems like dry is a little bit more common than sweet. Thank you, Jesus, because if I got a sweet rosé, I'd be hella fucking mad. So if you're looking for a food to pair with rosé, they say a light pasta, so nothing too heavy, but a good light pasta, a rice dish, and raw seafood. Okay, now we're getting into more of my wheelhouse, and that is the reds. We're gonna start with the light-bodied reds. So the light-bodied reds include Pinot Noir. So Pinot Noir is actually something that I have just recently started to love. I've always loved a good Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is Matt's favorite, has been since the beginning. Pinot Noir has been one of my sister's favorites for a long time as well. I was always a big Cabernet girl, but recently I've been really dabbling in the Pinot Noirs. Love a Pinot Noir. They pair well with a lot of things. So you can tell a Pinot Noir from a different red wine because it's usually pretty light in color. You can see through it a lot more than like a Cabernet. The other thing about Pinot Noirs that's great is it's very light in tannin. So when you take a sip of it, it's a lot more smooth, and you don't get that like tinge like you would of a Cabernet. Don't get me wrong, love a Cabernet, but the tannins can kind of shock you a little bit at times. Pinot Noir usually doesn't have that. Pinot Noir kind of goes down a lot smoother than most wines. So foods that pair well with a Pinot Noir would be goat cheese, a beef tenderloin, lamb, steak. So here's the thing about red wines. A lot of them pair really well with red meat. So this is gonna be a common theme going forward. I mean, when it comes to wine, they're all gonna pair well with cheeses, and then depending on what kind of wine it is. So if it's a white wine, it's usually always gonna pair really well with fish and chicken no matter what, and pork. And if you're talking about a red wine, it's always gonna pair well with red meat. Okay, now let's get into our medium-bodied red wines. This is gonna be your Merlot and your Zinfandel. So these two wines are loaded with flavors. So they usually pair well with like a zesty salad or a cheesy pasta or lasagna, along with obviously red meat as well. And then we get into our full-bodied red wines. So these are my faves. So this is your Malbec, your Cabernet, your Syrah. These are kind of the heaviest of the wines. So this is what I was talking about when I'm talking about like the heaviness, like the texture where it's a little bit like you can feel it on your tongue a lot more. These are high in tannins. So this is when you take a sip of wine and you're like, oh, that's kind of where that comes from. But if you have a good wine, that shouldn't be a huge deal. If you're looking for good foods to pair with a full-bodied red, I would go with gorgonzola cheese, lamb, red meat, steak, a filet, something. Oof, God, that sounds so good right now. Oof, I'm starving, you guys, literally starving. All right, and last but not least is number 9, dessert wines. So that is going to be your sweetest of the sweet. That's gonna be your port wine. So port wines are very sweet. Like, I mean, that is like dessert wine to the max. I can't really fuck with the port wine. It's too much for me. It's way too sweet. But I mean, at the end of the night, if you're like at some fancy foo-foo place and with a port wine. So I'm also gonna give you guys a little bit of a myth buster. So a lot of people, if you're like myself, you thought that twist caps were inferior to corked wine bottles, and that's actually not the case at all. If it has a twist cap, that just means it wasn't made for aging. Most of the wine that you're drinking probably isn't really that aged anyways. So twist cap, cork cap, doesn't make a difference. So that's kind of it, you guys. That's a brief little overview of wine and kind of the styles and the flavors of each different type. So you can kind of pick and choose on what you think pairs well with your palate and what you think matches well for you and your personality. I am a little tipsy myself, so I'm going to continue to drink more wine. I'm gonna go have some dinner because I am effing starving. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell so you know every time I post. Follow me on all my social medias. I'm gonna put my handle right here. My handle is @Melina_Iverson on Instagram and pretty much everything else that there is to offer. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, you guys. Have a great weekend. What the fuck? Cheers, babe. Honestly, truly, I was drinking a Chardonnay last night and that is exactly how I got to where I am today. It's been a rough one, you guys. Like, I can't even believe I'm here. I can't even believe I'm here. I can't even speak. I can't